Chapter 40, Daniel. The table was older than the main house of the Liss, older than most of the estate, even. It stood beneath the observatory dome at the top of the library wing, in a room dusted with spiderweb runes and disused enchantment coils. All right, time for some old-fashioned learning, Ethan said. He sounded way too excited. Daniel rolled his eyes. He laid his hand across the smooth obsidian surface, watching faint rings of light pulse outward in response. Touch-sensitive, Ethan murmured from the back of his mind. Now, runes keyed to ambient mana. Just hold your hand there. The center of the table glowed, lines of light branching outward in a blooming, geometric array. Then, with a sound like a whisper cutting silk, a three-dimensional map sprang to life-layered spirit glass projections floating above the stone. It began with the core. A sphere of golden light marked the capital, the seat of the imperial family glowing like a miniature sun suspended at the center of the world. Around it, semi-concentric rings of translucent territory shimmered outward. Not perfect circles. These were curved zones of influence, shaped by ley lines, mountain ranges, divine ruins, and ancient spellwork. Each ring pulsed with different resonance patterns, different colors, different intent. Welcome, Ethan said dryly, to the Etherean Empire. Daniel leaned in, absorbing it piece by piece. Cities shimmered in distant pulses. Mountain ridges rose in etched silhouette. Floating provinces and warded valleys rotated gently in suspended formation. And then the full scale of the terrain hit him. Snow-capped ridges bordering subtropical coastlines. Jagged canyonlands and swampy jungles. Highlands scarred by battlefield mana still crackling with residual energy. Entire biomes twisted together in strange contradictory harmony. It reminded him of home. Not this one, the other one. It's like the continental U.S. had a baby with Rivendell, he murmured. Stay away from their Yellowstone. It could eat you. The range of environments was staggering. Forests gave way to desert plateaus. River deltas bled into mana-pulsing plains. None of it felt governed by logic-only legacy. Mana has a strange effect on the world, Daniel muttered. First thing you need to know, Ethan said. Rings represent areas of influence, not borders. The closer to the capital, in theory, the most influence you have. No one draws clean lines through this kind of territory. You hold what you can. You protect what you must. We're here, Ethan added, pulsing a marker on the western curve of the second ring. House Lee's dominion. Not part of the first ring by choice, mind you. A smaller orb shimmered into view, its borders traced with silver glyphs and subtle pulses of mana. Daniel watched the lines form, a clean, deliberate shape, locked into the larger spell grid. The area was marked by a massive range, where the color coding distinguished the border between Ring 2 and 3 on the western border. So they control the routes between the capital and the western provinces. Exactly, Ethan said. The general's indispensable to the overall power structure of the empire, but he has little patience for politics and no patience for fools. So they settled out here, where the Hedong mountain range meets a great forest on Chudo. Concerned about mobility for heavy troops, he started building roads. He turned infrastructure into capital influence. Now half the continent's trade passes through Lai-administered channels. Ethan got Daniel to flick his fingers outward. The map expanded. There are 5 great rings. These are basically administrative zones. The first ring lit up. A dense golden cluster of energy flared into view, almost too bright to look at directly. The inner capital, Ethan said. Royal districts, sacred precincts. The imperial palace sits here. It sits on top of the Pier of Endor. It's basically a floating rock in the middle of the empire. But the first king of the land built the empire's palace there, and it's kept people at bay for over 1,500 years. Daniel squinted. A dozen overlapping wards pulsed around a concentrated sphere of power. Access is heavily regulated to the capital, even more so to the Imperial Plaza, the Empress's domain. She's particular. Some might say paranoid. We don't enter unless summoned. An empress. How progressive. Ethan snorted, only because the emperor has been in seclusion for about 10 years. Haha. Well, damn the patriarchy. What? Never mind. Ethan pulsed another sector. The second ring. Administrative zones excluding parliament and main residents of the Tier 1 and 2. Houses that aren't the LEs. The major guild halls and 2 of the 3 main academies. He gestured toward a spiral cluster of towers and rolling hills. That's the Imperial Academy. Daniel tilted his head. And that's where your old lab is? Indeed, an adjunct wing sealed. The Academy's a weird place, almost a mini-kingdom to itself. The headmaster is another one of the few peak human experts that are alive. The Academy has its own charter. Ancient privileges from the founding war. Not even the Emperor can walk into their archives without cause. So, how did you get in? I earned it. and then got sort of banished after receiving my degrees. Long story. Daniel's attention shifted. The third and fourth rings swept outward, far larger, more diverse. Their boundaries arced around mountain ridges, vast deserts, highlands, spell-sealed forests, and beaches nestled against oceans and lakes. Provincial zones stretched like tangled banners across mana-dense landscapes. Scorched frontier lands held by Housefang, the highland temples of the Wu Consortium, shifting mist valleys that never settled on maps. These are where most advanced cultivators come from, Ethan said. Not Tier 1 house science people who've reached the upper bottlenecks of the human realm. Some even flirting with what lies beyond. The deeper you go, the thinner the air, and the more dangerous the mana currents. There are also concentrations of other power divine, ether, wild qui. Dangerous. But the returns are outrageous. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're talking about people who went past level 10? Yes. The human realm's ceiling is more than just strength. It's cultural, structural, foundational. If humans are smoke, then anything beyond human is steel. Most of the energy in this world can't even be used properly. Too few people, too many locks, and the methods to ascend beyond human? Fragmented, buried, or outright forbidden. Daniel let that settle. So no ranking system? No S-class cultivators or whatever? That's for guilds and dramatized propaganda. Real cultivators don't wear letter grades. You're either human, or you've transcended. The fifth ring glimmered. Or didn't. Daniel frowned. The outermost edge of the map looked broken. Disordered. More suggestion than territory. The fifth ring isn't mapped, Ethan said. Too volatile. Dead empires, broken space, storms that don't follow rules, demon remnants, no proper governance, and some say portals to other worlds. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're foreshadowing a little heavily there, my friend. Never mind. So we're going there, right? Eventually, but not yet. Daniel chuckled dryly. Not good. Let me survive college first. The map contracted slightly. Ethan pulsed a node within the Academy's second ring sector, a sublayer beneath the visible buildings. This is where it is. My vault. Prototype lab. Isolated beneath the spell engineering department. Sealed after I left, but not deleted. Why not? They think they neutralized the tech. They didn't. They felt that was enough. Daniel studied the ward, cluster swirling like a suspended hurricane of golden light. And you think I can get in? You can. Your body is mine. Same bloodline. Same core signature. I tuned the lock to resonance frequency. Not exactly what I meant. Are they going to let me? Daniel felt the mental shrug. You're the son-in-law of House Lee. They'll have a hard time denying you. Daniel stepped back from the projection, arms folded. This feels big. It is big, Ethan said. That lab contains the only working scaffold I ever built for the framework. Raw materials, cross-reference notes, trace readers, even a few spirit-forged diagnostic rigs. Bottom line, we need what's in there. Ethan paused. If we get that vault open, we go from theory to architecture. Daniel nodded slowly, eyes still on the flickering map. How big is all this land, exactly? Ethan paused, calculating. From the far western sea cliffs to the eastern ridge barrier, about 5,000 to 6,000 length. A flying relay ship takes 3 days to cross it, assuming no storm interference. Daniel did the math. Roughly 3,000 miles, so about the size of the continental U.S. And only 10 million people, he muttered. That doesn't track. It used to be more, Ethan said softly. Daniel looked up. Before the last demon war, Ethan continued, this place was alive. Densely packed cities. Endless sex spires. Trade routes that pulsed like veins. The fifth ring alone held dynasties. And that was, how long ago? Over 1,000 years. That's long enough for full demographic recovery. Ethan's voice turned quiet. Yes, but they came back, Daniel blinked. Who? The demons. Not in force. Not like before. But enough. Quiet. Methodical. Searching. I don't know what for. Daniel stared at the ghost sectors, the unlit border towns, the fractured outlines of cities that hadn't pulsed a single mana signal in decades. And suddenly, 10 million didn't feel like a number. It felt like a countdown. Chapter 41, Daniel. The Imperial Academy looked less like a school and more like a sanctum built to withstand time itself. Vaulted gates rose above him, carved from pale spirit stone, veined with gold and laced with mana-etched runes. The entire front plaza was a performance of legacy statues of sages, fountains that bled charm-fed mist, and banners that shimmered with illusions of the Empire's greatest victories. Daniel had never seen it before, obviously being from another world and all that, and yet he could feel something familiar in the stone, a pressure, a rhythm beneath the ground, like stepping into a temple built not to worship gods, but knowledge. Straight ahead, Ethan said from the back of his mind. Us left of the main fountain. You'll pass a row of planners. Third one's hiding a ward stone that glitches during core sync pulses. Used to prank people there. Daniel blinked. You remember that? I lived here, Ethan replied. Or tried to. Beside him, Nathan Lee stretched with his arms folded behind his head. Brother-in-law, you didn't really go here, did you? This place is for a bunch of people who can't throw a proper punch. Daniel sighed at his younger brother-in-law. He'd been halfway through recalibrating a mana tracer when Nathan leaned into the lab with a grin and a bottle already in hand. Brother-in-law, you've been in that lab for weeks. Your wife is gone. Come on, drinking, gambling, a bit of tasteful whoring. My treat. Sorry, little brother. I'm heading to the Imperial Academy, Daniel replied without looking up. Nathan blinked. Your what? Academy? Why would you want to do that? Vault access. I need some of my old equipment. Nathan had stared for a long moment. Then, with a shrug and a grin, said, Fine, I'll take you. But it would be way more fun to go whoring. I notice you cut out the other stuff. Nathan ignored him. Imperial Academy, that's near the Jidan Sun. Perfect. There is a fantastic whorehouse there that has foreign beauties. We're taking one of the flight fleet carriages. They are expensive to operate, but Father will understand. And I'm not getting blamed if you get mobbed by nerds on the way. That was 2 days ago. He'd been like a kid in a candy store ever since. As they walked deeper into campus, Daniel's eyes scanned everything. The flow of students, the courtyard conversations, people studying, laughing, arguing in central squares. If he didn't know better, he would have thought he was back at a college on Earth, excluding the fact that everyone was dressed like a Chinese fantasy novel. That fact was actually a bit eerie. Dozens of students milled about the open courtyard, and as Daniel and Nathan crossed into view, heads began to turn. The whispers followed. Is that Ethan Joe? And didn't he get exiled? I heard he married into House Lee. No way. That's the same guy? Daniel ignored them all. He walked with the calm of someone who didn't need to explain himself. Chin level, pace steady, hands clasped behind his back. Not out of arrogance, out of control. You're not exactly popular, he said to Ethan inwardly. Ethan chuckled. I had the whole moody genius thing down when I was younger. Honestly, I was just awkward and, if I'm being honest, a bit of a dick. So these people knew you as awkward, Ethan? And you haven't been back since you regressed? Didn't seem important at the time. I spent my first couple of weeks just trying to catalog everything leading up to the Demon Clan War. That's really why Caleb had his window with Claire. Smart, Daniel murmured aloud. You should show me that list. Ethan flinched. Of course. It's stupid I haven't as of yet. Sorry, I'm used to working alone. Brother-in-law? Nathan said, frowning. Did you say something? Daniel glanced at him as they passed a stone gate lined with shimmering ward glyphs. Let me ask you something, he said. You being a martial prodigy and all? Nathan grinned. What is it? Of course, I'm always happy to bless you with my insights. I've been thinking about technique execution, Daniel said casually. Cycling them, specifically. Nathan blinked. Cycling. How quickly you can execute a martial technique, recover, and fire again. Not just physical readiness, the full chain. Mana infusion, intent alignment, activation sequence. Nathan gave a thoughtful look. Huh, never broke it down like that. Let's take Wind Lotus Gale Palm. How many times could you cast it in succession, say? 5 times in 15 seconds. Nathan rubbed his jaw. I can run that technique in my sleep, so pretty fast. But honestly, a better answer for your question is, it depends. You should think of it based on the individual technique. First, difficulty. That sets your mana drain and build-up window. Long or complex techniques take longer to recover. Daniel nodded. All that made sense. He expected as much. And alignment, Nathan added. Battlefield alignment, mental prep, activation flow, it all matters. Intent, breathing, mana pull, and the specific technique script. If even one of those is off, even if you've got the mana, the cast stutters. So the recovery window, Daniel said slowly. depends as much on internal cohesion as it does raw power and the actual ability to execute. You need the right mind state to maximize performance. Right, Nathan agreed. Battle recovery. That's as good a term as any, he shrugged. Push a technique when you're not aligned? You'll burden your core. That's why even experts drill basics until they're second nature. The more ingrained the technique, the faster you can reset. That's why high-end users cast like they're breathing. Daniel gave a low hum. So trained mana and muscle memory reduces the recalibration threshold. Nathan gave him a blank look. I don't know what that means. Daniel smirked. Thanks, that answered exactly what I needed. Nathan shrugged. Only you would treat technique cooldowns like a math problem. Daniel smiled, but his mind was already elsewhere. He doesn't even look at anyone. I heard he was a prodigy before he lost it. Maybe marrying Vivian Lee fixed him. Daniel let the words drift past. He wasn't here for attention. He was here to recover his tools. Their whispers didn't matter. He didn't know or care about these people. The reception hall rose before them. Glass walls curved like an open scroll, threaded with gold-fused runes. Inside, a young administrator in silver-trimmed robes approached, ledger in hand, unsure whether to bow or run. Honored guest, he said. May I ask your business with the Academy? I'm here to access a vault under the name Ethan Joe, Daniel replied. The attendant froze. That account was sealed. It's still mine. Unseal it. The man hesitated. One moment. I'll notify the senior archivist. As he turned away, Nathan let out a low whistle. You've got them twitchy. It's probably you, little brother, the great Nathan Lee, Daniel said. But if you're bored, you don't have to stay. I like that you understand people and me, brother-in-law. Still, these scholar types need to be taught respect. I will make sure they respect you. Besides, I want to see why this vault of yours gets a reaction like that, Nathan replied. And the gambling dens closed until dusk. They waited 5 minutes, then 10. Finally, an older man arrived. Distinguished, robed in muted red with a golden sash of authority. His hair was graying, but his mana presence was sharp and disciplined. Joe Ethan, he said with practiced warmth. Or should I say, Lord Joe? Daniel inclined his head. Administrator John. You've returned after a long absence, Gian said. The Academy remembers its own. Daniel said nothing. May I ask what stirs your memory now? I'm here for some of the contents of my vault. Papers, mostly. Gian's smile thinned. Those projects were sealed. Some believed they posed undue risk. They were sealed by people who didn't understand them. I'm not here for the projects, just my notes. Still, access is not simple. I'm not asking to publish, just to retrieve. Nathan leaned in. Mr. Scholarman, this is my brother-in-law. He is recognized by my father, General Lee. He gets what he wants. Do not make me intervene on behalf of the Lee household. Nathan's mana flared and his eyes went cold. You wouldn't like that. Gian's eyes widened in surprise. Ethan, you realize marrying into House Lee doesn't make you immune to scrutiny. Daniel met his gaze evenly. True, but it does give me room to impose consequences, hypothetically. A long pause. Then, temporary clearance, limited hours, no assistance, no object removal without inventory record. That'll work. Gian turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Some of your old colleagues are still here. They will be interested in your return. I'm not here for them. They walked away without another word. Nathan and Daniel entered the stairwell to the lower vaults. Nathan exhaled dramatically. You know, this whole place feels like it wants to spit you out. It did, Ethan said quietly. Daniel walked faster. The vault door opened with a deep thrum, Manalocks disengaging layer by layer. Daniel stepped inside. The air was dry. Still, the space beyond felt more like a tomb than a lab. Dust shimmered in the filtered mana light. Shelves lined the walls, sealed scrolls, etched slates, forgotten apparatuses under draped cloths. Nathan stepped in behind him. Cozy. Brother-in-law, are you sure they didn't hold you prisoner? Do you want me to burn this place to the ground? Daniel tried not to laugh. The funny thing was, Nathan was serious. Daniel just shook his head. It's okay, little brother. They cannot hurt us. He looked around not at the objects, but the structure. This was a place built not for discovery, but containment. He moved to the nearest table. Stacked scrolls. Sealed cases. Ethan's handwriting curled across the labels. Technical, precise, quiet. Waiting. Daniel didn't open a single one. These aren't what you need, are they? He muttered. No, Ethan said in his mind. This is the visible. Important, but broken and not very helpful. A picture suddenly came to Daniel's mind. He turned toward the back wall. A flat surface, too flat. No shelving. No console. Just reinforced stone. Back there? Daniel asked. Not left corner. There's a crack along the baseboard. Looks like a structural fault. It isn't. Daniel crouched and ran his fingers along the stone. He found it hairline thin, a segment that didn't vibrate quite like the rest. He pressed. A faint click sounded. A rune flashed briefly. A small panel recessed into the wall shifted aside, revealing a hidden storage alcove lined with black crystal. Inside were 3 cases. No labels. No imperial seal. No obvious locking mechanism, just layered reinforcement wards that pulsed faintly like they were holding their breath. Daniel reached for the first case. Carefully, Ethan said, that one houses the sequencing lattice. Daniel opened it. Inside, resting on dark velvet, was a device unlike anything else he'd seen in this world. It looked like a scroll frame, but layered with carved glyph circuitry, mirrored spirit glass, and a double coil of channel wire fused with golden thread. Dozens of switching nodes branched outward like a circuit tree. At its center, an embedded crystal flickered faintly, dormant but not dead. What is it? Daniel whispered. My first attempt at a sequencing engine, Ethan said. It was designed to track and organize embedded spells by execution pattern, not glyph sequence. Input tracking, loop variation, recursive glyph modulation. At the time, I didn't even have the right language to explain what it was doing. Daniel stared at it. You built this here? I built it in pieces, hid it before the deans could classify it. If they'd understood what it did, they would have destroyed it outright. Daniel closed the case gently. What about the others? Middle case has the language binder early prototype for symbolic intent parsing. Don't open it without gloves. The mana started acting strange, dirty almost. I think it was polluted somehow. Right case is a data slate. Notes, design logs. Experimental compression methods for multi-threaded spirit techniques. They are dangerous theoretical, but dangerous if implemented correctly. Some of those entries are banned. Daniel sat back on his heels, staring at the hidden cache. So you weren't just trying to learn spells, he said. You were trying to rewrite what a spell even is. I didn't want to cast faster, Ethan replied. I wanted to cast smarter, cleaner. I wanted to build a system that made the structure visible, not just the result. I also wanted to try to tamper with tempering mantras to see if we could create more specific variations for individuals. Those were my 2 main goals with the framework. Tempering mantras, Daniel thought with a grin. Daniel could feel Ethan's annoyance. You'd call them cultivation methods. But I hate that. Daniel chuckled as he reached out, laying his hand on the sealed case. This is what we needed, he said. The scaffolding. Exactly. Nathan stepped forward, peering over Daniel's shoulder. This is the part where I pretend to understand what you're doing? Chapter 42. Daniel. The workbench glowed faintly as Daniel adjusted the calibration node. Thin filaments of light traced lines across the surface, forming a spiderweb of diagnostic glyphs. Ethan's old tech was still functional barely, and was actually really clever, based on his explanation of both the theory and function of the parts. Ethan would have made a hell of an engineer in his world. At the same time, it made Daniel realize how much work had to be done to realize their ambition. The leftover mage tech, materials, and most importantly, the theory and notes were a start. Truthfully, Daniel relished the experience of diving into the magic tech, the problems it presented and the hope for solving them. It was almost like being back home. Around him, the vault hummed with quiet purpose. Shelves of sealed scrolls and crystal casings lined the walls, but Daniel ignored them. He continued to tinker with the old equipment at Ethan's suggestion. The old tech wasn't super helpful, but it was fascinating and helped Daniel understand the bigger picture. Start with flushing the node with your mana, Ethan said in his mind, tone dry but focused. Forget structure. Just check how stable the flow paths are. Daniel nodded to himself and began feeding mana into the sequence relay. He didn't infuse it with emotion or tried not to. He didn't direct it with desire. He simply focused on his mana control and pushed the flow up his arm meridian. It was surprising how easy it was. The glyphs on the lattice began to flicker. Symbols formed and connected into a spell array. The glyphs emerged like circuitry from a dream. It was like watching something from a Marvel movie. Okay now, Ethan said. Give it a command while pushing your mana into that node with intent. Daniel did so. And as he attempted to insert a secondary intent command, the system buckled. The entire array stuttered sigils blurring, collapsing into nonsense as the light guttered out. Daniel exhaled and leaned back. It's not the structure, he muttered. It's the contamination. Intent, Ethan confirmed. Mana's too expressive. Even when you try to stay neutral, it still leaks. Daniel tapped a stylus against the workbench. So that's what you were working against. What every spell system is built on. Emotionally flavored instructions. It's not a language. It's a scream of mostly gibberish. It works on the individual level has for centuries, but building anything for automation or command instruction is very difficult. Damn near impossible. Daniel stood, walking a slow circuit around the table, while Nathan snored in the corner. He kept thinking back to what he'd seen on this world's communication relay, their Maginet network. A magical system meant for information sharing across the Empire. Enchanted relay crystals, signal flares, public technique registries. But the more he saw of it, the more it reminded him of a memory-corrupted interface. No indexing, no formatting, no logic isolation. Everything ran on mana and intent was unstable. Honestly, it was insane that the damn thing worked at all. They had something akin to TikTok, without a proper mainframe or network. You can't build a reliable network with a medium that changes every time someone's angry, Daniel muttered. And yet we did. Daniel looked down at the sputtering glyph set. This isn't a communication problem, it's a basic structure problem. Go on, Ethan prompted. We're trying to build structure out of raw instinct. Every spell, every glyph, every function, it's hardwired to mana with intent. What we need is a protocol that runs without interference. A language protocol. A way to record that language and reproduce it at will, and then a way to run those protocols based on the language instruction, which should become reproducible. I think the only way that's going to happen is if we have hardware that filters the intent out, or doesn't use mana at all. Daniel shook his head. We need to completely redesign this from the ground up. Power source, hardware, software, operating system, and then long-term power and storage. After that, we can tackle the internet problem. I don't really know what those words mean. But if I'm understanding your context, you want a complete redesign of the system. No one's done that. You're talking crazy, my friend. Daniel smiled faintly. That's the point. If the Empire relies on the system to communicate, anyone with half a brain is going to attack the network the moment a war starts. We have to take care of the obvious weakness. If you want your framework idea to actually work, we start here. First, the power source. He turned back to the table and began sketching diagrams. Lines, nodes, loops. He didn't have the power source yet. Didn't even have a material that could hold the frequency range he wanted. But he could build the blueprint. Have you already thought of options? Ethan asked. Yeah, but you'll have to weigh in, Daniel said. I see 3. 1, figure out a way to use ultra-pure mana with no intent at all. But I don't even know if that exists. Agreed. A pure mana source is out. 2, develop a filter. Something to pull the intent, corruption, and impurities out of mana, leaving raw power behind. Based on your notes, some divine class materials might do that. They'd be expensive and hard to find, but predictable. I'll take that over unpredictable failure. And 3? Daniel hesitated. Don't use mana at all. Ethan was silent. That's blasphemy. Daniel shrugged. Only if it doesn't work. They then launched into one of the most intense arguments they'd ever had. Daniel didn't notice her at first. The girl stood near the edge of the hall, half-shadowed by a reflection glyph, embedded in the polished stone wall. Her robes were unmarked plain ivory with soft charcoal trim, technically within dress code, but tailored too perfectly to be standard issue. It wasn't just the fit that caught his attention. It was the way she moved, shoulders squared, spine straight, hands at rest but always ready. Quiet confidence. Not someone who needed to shout. She didn't have to. Oh, and the magic clung to her like static electricity at a carpet convention. The girl wore a thin mask across her mouth, common enough among alchemy students, according to Ethan. But it made her look like a villain from a post-apocalyptic thriller. Her eyes were dull brown, unremarkable. But even with the mask and her darkened shoulder-length hair, there was no hiding the posture, the tension of someone used to standing out, which was odd because she clearly wasn't trying to. Interesting, Daniel thought. He was halfway through realigning the diagnostic glyphs when she spoke. Why not hard script the intent into the matrix? She asked softly. Try to use it instead of fighting against it. If the carrier pattern's stable enough, it should overwrite fluctuation and maybe get the reproducible effect you're looking for. Her voice was clear, articulate, but not haughty, measured. Daniel turned slowly. Despite the dullness of her eyes, they were sharp. Alert. Curious. She was built like Marissa Hipp's, bust but taller. Maybe 6 feet. The robe did little to conceal how unapologetically feminine her figure was. Then there was her mana. It wasn't absent, it was concealed. Deliberately, Daniel had taken great strides to learn control, and Ethan said he was doing damn well. But this girl, she was beyond that. She'd mastered stillness, suppression. She wasn't a novice. Not even close. Things were getting very interesting. Daniel kept his tone neutral as he made eye contact. It won't work for what I'm trying to do. If the matrix structure holds memory, residual intent corrupts the input. The bleed-through stacks. And she inclined her head. Then anchor the structure in static arrays. Lock the framework. Separate the machine apparatus from the spell matrix. Reset after every use. That works if you want to cast one spell at a time over and over. Static, but not scalable. Not if you want systems sending, receiving, and interpreting input. She blinked. What? You want to build a machine that can cast spells? Daniel grinned. Eventually? Maybe. But first, I want a magic system that can analyze people. Give feedback. Respond. She let out a slow breath. Damn. Talk about ambitious. I've been told I'm crazy. And a bit of an overachiever. She looked him up and down like she was reassessing him. Then, without another word, she turned. She moved with grace, the kind that only the rich or dangerous learned how to fake. At the archway, she paused. Turned. Smiled polite, measured, deliberately forgettable. Marin, she said, you're Ethan Joe, right? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Everything about her voice, posture was composed. But it was too composed, practiced, rehearsed. I've heard your name, she added. Mostly in arguments. Daniel tilted his head. I tend to inspire those. Her smile didn't grow, but her eyes gleamed faintly behind the mask. Well, she said, I hope you find what you're looking for. Then she vanished into the corridor, graceful, unhurried, and far too smooth to be who she claimed. Ethan stirred in the back of his mind. Marin, you think that's her real name? Not a chance. She's clearly in disguise. Odd place to be in disguise. There are all types. Truth. Daniel stared after her. Do we find out who she is? Ethan asked. I don't know. Do we care? Daniel shrugged. Not really. You think she's a spy? Maybe. Maybe not. If she is, she's not a good one. She stands out after 2 minutes of watching her. He turned back to the lattice. But let's assume worst case. She's spying. Could anyone actually figure out what we're building? Ethan hesitated. My old colleagues could maybe get some of the theory. Steal pieces. Try to run with it. Daniel nodded. If they had the tools and the patience and a decade to burn, and they still wouldn't get it right. So, even if she's spying, she can't steal anything. The ideas are too far ahead. Most wouldn't even know where to begin, even if we gave them blueprints. She was sharp, though. Sharp enough to follow. And she didn't want to be recognized, Daniel added, which means she didn't want credit. Just curiosity, a pause. How did you know she was masked? Ethan asked. Daniel blinked. There was mana around her face, Ethan continued. Strange. Not strange. Layered. Daniel walked back toward the casting circle and held his fingers out where she'd stood. 3 folds. 1 cloaking intent. 1 bending perception. 1 bleeding ambient heat. She wasn't just hiding her face. She was hiding how it felt to look at her. Ethan whistled. You saw that with the naked eye? Daniel nodded. Only when I started pushing mana into my sight. Wait, you couldn't do that? Nope. That wasn't in the toolkit. Though, I think our wife can. Daniel chuckled. I don't think it's talent. I think it's intention. The more you try to define it, the more the world listens. He looked down at the still glowing lattice. So, who do you think she is? No idea, Daniel said. Not my world. Right. I forget that sometimes. Daniel shrugged. If this were a script, she's probably someone important, playing it low to gather intel. Could be testing us. Or maybe we're just a side quest in her drama. You think she's Imperial? Maybe. Or maybe she's hunting her brother's killer, the one who died from bullying in a sex school. Her only clue? A corrupted memory crystal and some broken dreams. Ethan paused. What? Daniel shrugged again. If it's her sister, I'd feel bad for taking advantage while comforting her. Ethan laughed silently. You're a menace. I'm a philanthropist.